welcome YouTube to another installment of D&D Fridays. This is your truly, the Geek Life. Remember, always to hit that subscribe button, comment below, and hit that notification bell, and like the video. Today we'll be continuing on our little mini-series here of overview of the different classes. So today we'll be taking a look at the first class is Cleric, and just seeing what the man of the cloth has to offer our adventuring party. So without further ado, let's check it out. So first off, when you think of a cleric is that typically that priestly type of person of the cloth, whatever religious affair that you're thinking of.
Whatever cloth means to you, right?
Yeah. So that could be a pretty interesting thing to roleplay, depending on which subclass you go with, as there's a lot of different pantheons to choose from within the world of D&D. And so with clerics are one of the very few classes that have access to divination magic, which can offer some very powerful effects. So as a cleric, they're a full caster, so they get all the spell slots, all the spell levels, and just think of different real world examples of the Pope and other things of that nature, or you could follow the storm god Thor if you wish. So there's many different things that you can really shape your cleric up to be. And so when it comes to cleric, you do get proficiency in wisdom and charisma saving throws, which are two pretty good saving throws to have, especially wisdom saving throws. It's going to be pretty hard to really dominate or suggestion or whatever it may be of yourself. So that's a plus right there. Also, one of the big things when it comes to clerics, though, is typically they have this power called Channel Divinity, which is once a day use, or it gets up to 3 days of use at higher levels, where it does different things that depend on your subclass. Although the basic cleric one allows you to turn undead, which allows you to pretty much frighten undead should they fail a saving throw, and if they're a low enough CR, they're automatically destroyed. So if your campaign's using a lot of undead, that could potentially be a very useful power. And then each cleric subclass gets one or two different things, either potent spellcasting or blessed strikes, depending on if they're focusing more on the spell slinging or wielding a mace or some type of weapon. It basically allows you to either add your wisdom modifier to a cleric cantrip or add extra damage onto a weapon attack. So that could be useful stuff right there. Then the other big thing of clerics is their divine intervention. That's the big thing you get at 10th level, and what it allows you to do is roll a d100, and if you roll your level or lower, you can basically ask your god for any sort of favor or anything like that. Now, the one thing to note about that is, number one, it is hard to pull off, and number two, like the wish spell, you have to really be careful on what you ask, because it's up for DM interpretation on exactly what type of help you get with that.
Yes, you want to be very precise, because you never know how mischievous your patron might take that, i.e. the DM.
Yeah. So whenever you do that and it works, always have a little powwow session with your fellow players and hash it out.
Yep.
So for the most part, that's what the cleric is all about. What's your thoughts on the cleric as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting class. right? It's sort of this amalgamation of part fighter, part healer, part spellcaster, with that focus in healing. I, I sort of feel like it's sort of a good starter class because you can kind of dabble in both things without committing to one or the other necessarily, and you can kind of get a little bit of a feel for whether or not you want to try a more combat heavy swinging weapons sort of character next time, or more of the spell casting sort of character, the next time. So I think it's an interesting class because you've got both dynamics there.
Yep. So with that, let's take a look into the subclasses and just get a brief little insight on to which of these subclasses do what. But before we head there, one thing to note though is Cleric is a wisdom-based spellcasting class, with wisdom being one of the top three stats in the game. Wisdom is very good, a good save. It fuels your perception, which is one of the better ability checks, so on and so forth. So that's a plus of a cleric. So with that, the first subclass that we want to talk about is the arcane cleric, arcana cleric. So with
Arcana.
yeah, so what this subclass is all about, it focuses a little bit more on the arcane magic. So it borrows some stuff from the wizard class. So one of the big things is you can pick any two cantrips from the wizard spell list and add them to your list, and they become cleric cantrips to fuel anything else that is based off of cleric cantrips. So one of the good things to do with that is to use at least one of your free spell cantrips that you get to pick up something like Firebolt or Ray of Frost or something like that, so you can have a damaging cantrip that's tied to an attack roll instead of a save and throw. Because as it is, the only damaging spells that cantrips that cleric get are things like Sacred Flame and Toll the Dead, which are based off of save and throws. So it's always good to have a little variation in those regards.
Another great spell would be Magic Missile
Yep, exactly.
for that cantrip. Yep.
And then one of the other things from the Arcana spell or cleric that I find is actually pretty good is its 17th level spell or feature, which is known as Arcane Mastery. Now, what this allows you to do is you gain 4 spells from the wizard spell list that's added to your spell list and prepared all the time for free. And these 4 spells, they come from, each one comes from one of the last 4 levels. So you get one 6th level, one 7th level, one 8th level, and one 9th level spell from the wizard, which allows not only a lot of versatility but a lot of raw power depending on what you pick up.
Oh yeah, that's there. There's a lot of versatility there. Being able to pick some of the most powerful spells in the game.
Yep. So, so if you're looking for a little bit of power and versatility in that regards, definitely take a look at the Arcana cleric. So next up, we have the Death Domain cleric. Now, what the Death Domain cleric is all about the passage of death and really looking into this aspect of death. Now, the Death Domain cleric, it really comes from the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide. So definitely pick that up if you're looking for that class. So it gets a few interesting spells for free, such as Anti-Life Shell, Death Ward, Animate Dead, things like that. That dabbles in the necromantic type sort of things. Now, one of the interesting things of it is it also gains proficiency with martial weapons, one of the very few cleric subclasses to actually gain that proficiency, along with the Tempest, War, and Twilight domains, which we'll cover in a little bit. So, one of the things that that it also gets on level 6 is any necromantic damage that you inflict on enemies, it pretty much bypasses resistances. So you're either taking full damage or no damage from necrotic spells, which can be a huge boon.
Absolutely. That's that's a very powerful ability.
Yep. So so with that, you would definitely want to pick up a lot of good necromantic spells. Of course, still vary your spell damage types, but it definitely pile on the necromantic spells. And also, another big thing of the death domain is whenever you cast a cantrip, or either a cantrip or a spell of first through fifth level that targets only one creature normally. If another enemy is within 5 feet of that creature, you can also target that enemy. So you're basically getting a free twin cast of that spell with some limitations. So there's not a whole lot of spells in that level range, but one of the better ones to use is actually the Toll the Dead cantrip. So you can potentially get that D12 on two different creatures at once.
Right. Another one is Chill Touch.
Yep,
That would be another one you could use there.
yep. So both of those I think are really good options for that mini twin.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be if you're definitely going into this subclass, this cleric domain, then you definitely want to take advantage of that feat for sure.
Yep. And it might be a cool, pretty subclass to really roleplay as well. So the next subclass is the Forge Domain Cleric. So this cleric is all about the forge and smithing up new armor, new weapons, whatever it may be. So it depend on what you're doing, it may or may not play out in an RP type of setting. So definitely talk with your GM beforehand. But the Forge Domain has some really cool abilities. So the first one you get at first level, you can pretty much touch either a non-magical weapon or a non-magical piece of armor, and if it's the weapon, it becomes in essence a +1 weapon, and if it's the armor, you add a +1 to your AC. So it's really doubling down on that support type of ability.
Absolutely.
Uh, Also, they get another ability on level 6 where it says, first off, you have straight resistance against fire damage, which is really good. And also, as long as you're wearing heavy armor, which you do get proficiency in as a Forge Domain Cleric, you get a straight +1 to your AC. So if you combine the first and the sixth level spell or features, you're basically getting a +2 to your AC. Now, if you combine that with like a shield and the Shield of Faith spell, you're getting a +6 AC in total, making you so much more tanky from an AC perspective.
Right.
So, so you're pretty much if you go with that set of skills and full plate, you're looking at 24 AC. 20,
That's amazing for any character, but especially for your tank. That the forge cleric is essentially your tanky tank,
yeah,
the guy that you want in that front line taking those hits.
yeah. Like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that is somehow either take like a level in fighter, the martial adept feat, or something like that to pick up the defense fighting style for another +1 in AC, and then go like a hexblade warlock or a sorcerer or something like that to pick up the shield spell. You're looking at a potential 30 AC before you take into account any sort of magic items.
Yeah, that's can't really you can't really look that gift horse in the mouth when it's 30 AC.
And and honestly, when you're having a 30 AC character, you're more or less forcing the DM to target your saving throws, so keep that in mind. And also, the last thing with the Forge Domain Cleric is on 17th level, they become straight out immune to fire damage. So it's like, oh, Ancient Red Dragon, come at me, bruh. Your breath means nothing to me.
I will bathe in your fire.
Now keep that in mind. Just because you have immunity to fire damage doesn't mean it's immunity to lava. So keep that in mind.
That is a very good point. You can't just tap dance on top of that lava. You're gonna lose a few limbs.
Yep. It's basically at that point, just like anybody else, the only way you can tap dance on lava is if somebody in your party casts the water walk spell.
There you go.
Which I always find strange that you can pretty much walk on lava, even though it's called water walk.
Water walk. Yeah.
But
Quirks of D&D.
yeah, but I don't know anybody that wouldn't take that. I mean, lava is lava.
It is lava.
So next is the Grave Domain Cleric. So Grave Domain is similar to the Death Domain, where it really focuses on the aspect of death, but as opposed to the Death Domain Cleric, who really loves death and that type of stuff, the Grave Domain Cleric is all about ensuring that passage of time from the living to the death, and just making sure that folks like the undead are actually seeing a legit, real process of dying, as undead are typically seen as abnormal. So you can kind of play it similar, I guess, depending on how you want to do it, but a little brief overview of some of those features is, first off, you gain the Spare the Dying cantrip for free, and you can cast it up to 30 feet, so you have some range to it now, which is great. And then another big thing of the Grave Domain Cleric is you can use your reaction whenever one of your allies, and I think yourself, suffers a nat 20 on an attack roll. You can use your reaction to say, nah, that natural 20 never happened. Still hits, but it's not counted as a natural 20. It's just a regular hit, and any sort of effects that would normally trigger off of a natural 20 does not happen. So something like a vicious weapon or something like that doesn't happen. So it's really good in terms of a little bit of longevity in that regards.
It can definitely extend that fight. That's an ability that's gained at level 6, correct?
Yeah. And it can definitely be a very powerful feature depending on how well your DM's dice are hot that night. Because from experience, there's been some nights where I've had cold dice, and there's been other nights where I've had like 5 natural 20s in a single combat. So depending on the night, that feature can be oh so helpful.
Definitely. Oh yeah.
Especially once you get to later levels, when a critical hit, especially from like a paladin, a rogue, something like that, could easily be 100+ damage in a single round.
Exactly.
So the next subclass is the Knowledge Domain Cleric. So the Knowledge Domain Cleric is all about that intellect. So I see the Knowledge Domain Cleric more like maybe like the Pope or something like that, where it's like maybe not as focused on actual combat, but it's all about knowing more about the history of things, about the religious affairs, about things of that nature. So it gets things like suggestion, augury, arcane eye, things like that. And you can gain a proficiency in a few different intelligence skills, I believe. So really doubling down on that whole knowledge is power, and holy knowledge is power as well. What's your thoughts about the knowledge domain cleric?
Yeah, that's an interesting domain, right? To me, that doesn't seem to quite fit with the other domains that we've talked about because it's a little bit more focused on book learning, book learning. Um, but I think it would be a very interesting play for sure, and I think there's probably some very interesting interactions that you can get out of playing this type of cleric.
Yep. So I would see it more useful in like a mystery campaign or like a more of a RP type of campaign. If you know you're going into a campaign with where combat is the focus, it's probably better to choose any of the other cleric subclasses.
Sure, definitely that makes a lot of sense. The your level 2 channel divinity knowledge of the ages seems like that would be, if you don't have a certain type of uh, character in your party, like let's say somebody that's really good at disarming traps, right? They're proficient in, they can learn that skill and be proficient in it, right?
hmm So it's definitely a interesting but out of the ordinary cleric subclass.
Definitely, yes.
Next up, we have probably the most iconic type of cleric, the life cleric. Now, the life cleric is all about the heals, which
The
is
heals.
what a cleric is pretty known for. Um, for instance, right out the gate, you get a feature where whenever you cast a healing spell of first level or higher, that spell heals an additional 2 plus the spell level. So let's say you cast Healing Word at ninth level, that's going to heal 1d4 plus Wisdom modifier plus 11.
That's great. That is a great ability that, just adding on extra hit points on a healing spell is awesome.
Yep. And if you happen to do something like a mass cure wounds, a mass healing word, something like that, that little added heal goes on each person that you actually heal with.
Right.
So that can be pretty useful. Like I know there's been many cases where that little extra few hit points put somebody just over that 100 HP hit mark for a power word kill or something like that. So it can be very useful. And then, like another useful trick of the life domain cleric is at 6th level, whenever you heal somebody else, you also gain a small portion of that heal, which is really good because you can build your life domain cleric as maybe like a little bit of a tank, go up there to soak some sponges, soak up some attacks, heal somebody else, and you get a little bit of healing to top it off. That's pretty good.
Is really good. Yes.
But I think probably one of the best thing about the life domain cleric is should you get up to 17th level to get the supreme healing feature, it basically says whenever you make a whenever you cast a healing spell that heals people based off of die rolls, you automatically use the maximum amount for that. So let's say you use a first level healing word, which is a D4, you automatically use 4 for that, and that
That's great.
and that compounds with whatever the healing spell does, plus your first level ability to add 2 plus the spell level to it.
Yeah. That it it's very late. It's very late in the progression tree, right? It's the last skill that you or last feat that you get in life domain, but extremely useful in the late game, right? Being
Yeah,
able to max out your heals is very, very powerful.
yeah, and it actually makes things like upcast and cure wounds a little bit more viable again, as it comes to a time where it's like, cure wounds, yeah, that's good, but to be able to max out a D8 per level now with Cure Wounds. That's really good.
Yeah.
Or like a level 5 Mass Cure Wounds. Now everybody's getting that 24 plus all your other stuff, points of healing.
Yep.
That's the end of this holy video. So until next time, YouTube, keep your life geeky.